You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. We'll have more news this evening, but first...
The latest Gene-ology, a Roddenberry podcast.
Episode 55, Blue Fire. Welcome to Mission Log Gene-ology. I'm Ashley Thomas.
And I'm Earl Green. Each week on Gene-ology, we dig through the archives of Gene Roddenberry's early TV writing work, looking for signs of the morals, meanings, and messages that he frequently worked into his most famous creation, Star Trek.
Earl will be back with trivia in just a moment, but first, here is how you can reach us. Gene-ology is meant to be entertaining and informative, but it's also just the beginning of an ongoing conversation about the works of Gene Roddenberry. Drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com and join us on Facebook at missionlogpod. While you're at it, leave us a review and rating at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. Those 5-star reviews are what help folks find us, so please leave one of those if you're so inclined. And remember, folks, your comments could be used on future installments of Gene-ology. And now, this week's trivia. Earl, fire away and make it blue.
Okay, well, I try not to make it too blue, because this is a PG-rated podcast at best. Blue Fire is Gene's second and final script for The Detectives. And this one sees Robert Taylor take a bit of a backseat, but that is the whole point of having an ensemble cast. Blue Fire aired on January 15th, 1960, just 1 week after Karate, and just 1 day before the 1960 Writers Guild strike began, lasting for 4 months. In March 1960, the Screen Actors Guild joined them, the last time that both of these guilds would walk the picket lines together until 2023. So while there was a script of Gene's that was already handed in and filmed prior to the strikes that aired during the strike, and for the record, that will be the one we're covering in next week's show. After that, we will be jumping ahead significantly in 1960. This episode was directed by Don Medford, whose list of TV directing credits stretches as far back as the early 50s for Ziv's science fiction theater, and as far forward as 1989 episodes of True Blue and Jake and the Fat Man. He directed a baker's dozen of this show's episodes, and would work with Gene later, directing 3 episodes of The Lieutenant. Other notable entries in his career included The Twilight Zone, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., both the original and 80s incarnations of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and yes, even David Cassidy, Man Undercover. Michael Pate guest stars as Lyman. While he was the heavy here, he himself would go on to be a detective on another show, starring as Detective Sergeant Vic Mattern in the series Matlock Police. No, not that Matlock, and no, not the other Matlock that we have now. It's a completely unrelated show that ran from 1971 through 75, and Michael starred in 193 episodes of that show. He also turned up in episodes of Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, The Time Tunnel, and Adam West's Batman series. Joey Fay is Willie the Informant. Joey was a veteran of vaudeville and often served as Phil Silver's second banana on stage. Joey originated material that would later become much more famous once it was adopted by other acts such as Abbott and Costello. Now, the name of the show's associate producer caught my eye in the end credits. What do I know Arthur H. Nadel from? He had associate producer credits on both The Detectives and The Rifleman, both shows produced by 4-Star Productions at around the same time. But where fans of genre fare of the 70s might remember his name will be his string of producer credits on Filmation's live-action series, Shazam, ISIS, Space Academy, and Jason of Star Command.
We've been together a long time, all of us. The kind of... I know this sounds like corn, Matt, but we had the kind of thing here that a man finds once in the whole lifetime of work. Let me bow out of it on my feet.
The thing that made us that team was someone named Lindstrom. He was twice the cop any of us ever hoped to be. Informants no one else could reach would stand in line to help him. He knew places in the city that aren't even on the maps. He could tell you who was in town and who was leaving before it even happened. Now you're still carrying a badge that says Lieutenant of Detectives, and you're still drawing a salary at that level. Whatever your personal problems, I want work on that level. Impersonal, intelligent, experienced, professional police work. Do I make myself clear?
Yes, sir.
Prologue. Detectives Russo and Conway are listening as a mother and daughter tell them somewhat contradictory stories. The elderly mother mentions entrusting all of her money to a Mr. Beaudry, who is investing every penny of it in U.S. gold certificates. Why, Mr. Beaudry even took her to visit the Treasury official he would be dealing with. The woman's daughter is distraught. We are talking about $6,400 here, and her mother took out a mortgage on her house to come up with some of that money. And worse yet, the office of that Treasury official was apparently rented just for the one day. This all seems familiar to Russo and Conway. It sounds like the work of the broker. But just to check, they show her a picture of the broker. And yes, that is indeed her Mr. Beaudry. Real name? Marcel the Broker Lyman. He's the same conman who has evaded Detective Otto Lindstrom and his bunco squad a number of times. Hey, here's Otto now, just back from his routine physical. When Conway and Russo try to tell him that the broker is back in town and just begging to be busted, Lindstrom doesn't even respond. In fact, he's got a kind of 1,000-yard stare going on. Lindstrom just flunked his physical. He's being forced into retirement. Act 1. Conway knows what to do. Call Captain Holbrook in on the case. Also, Conway's kind of friendly with the nurse at the doctor's office where Lindstrom had his physical, so he calls her too, offers to wine her and dine her. Oh, hey, could you delay sending Lindstrom's papers for a couple of days? Thanks. Having interfered with official procedures, Conway and Russo feel like this buys time for Lindstrom to get away from it all, bring his blood pressure down, and come back and demand a do-over on his physical exam. But Otto Lindstrom's not thinking vacation at all. He's thinking he now has 48 hours to get rid of the broker. Lindstrom calls a contact of his and demands an immediate meeting in the alley. That meeting is fast and a little bit furious. Lindstrom wants the deets on what Lyman is up to from his informant, Willie, and he doesn't have a lot of time to wait around. Willie comes back with a man named Mays and then takes off. Lindstrom starts out interrogating Mays about Lyman's whereabouts, and when he doesn't get the information he's looking for, hey, let's do some extrajudicial violence until Mays chokes up an address. Lindstrom goes to that address, kicks the door open. Oh, hey, you're not Lyman. Lindstrom finds a very unhappy couple, very unhappy that he kicked their door down, and the man whose door he just kicked in demands to see his badge number. Lindstrom apologizes and leaves. Evening. Lindstrom and Willie have another meeting about the broker in the alley. It turns out Lyman has a new associate who may be willing to roll over on him, and he's waiting to meet Lindstrom at a nightclub right now. But this associate of Lyman's, a nervous man named Jack Hassett, is surprised when Lyman himself shows up at the club. Awkward. Lyman senses Hassett's nervousness and adds to it by sticking around and ordering a round of drinks. The broker finishes his drink in one gulp and says, "May we die rich," and all that, while also quietly stabbing Jack Hassett in the side. Lyman leaves just before Lindstrom shows up. Bad news, Otto. Jack Hassett is dead. Act 2. Police headquarters. Captain Matt Holbrook gives someone on the phone what for about Lindstrom's impending forced retirement. He wants another exam done, and he's putting his own neck out there to make that demand. With that, Holbrook hangs up on the police commissioner. Then there's a knock on the door. Lindstrom is reporting as ordered. After asking how Lindstrom is feeling, Holbrook gets to the point. Breaking down the door of the wrong guy? That was bad, and Lindstrom will sacrifice 10 days' salary to pay for the damages. The fact that Lindstrom's latest contact was murdered means that maybe the case of the broker needs to be assigned to the homicide division. Lindstrom asks Holbrook not to take him off the case. He still has 24 hours before he's pushed out the door. But Holbrook makes it clear he needs Lindstrom to think things through like he always used to, and to get things right rather than make a bunch of mistakes because he's racing the clock. Lindstrom visits a local watering hole where he knows he'll find his informant, Willie. You know, his original informant, the one who's still alive. He pitches a new approach to catching Lyman. He needs Willie to go to Lyman and tell him that Lindstrom is a local businessman who's been conspicuously flashing cash. After all, Lyman has no idea who Lindstrom is. He won't recognize him. That night, at the same bar, Lindstrom plays the part of Lyman's next mark. Lyman shows off a blue fire diamond. It's for sale, you know. He's got a well-rehearsed sob story about it being a fake, and expects the mark to have it appraised by a jeweler, which Lindstrom does. And then Lindstrom comes back and hands over $400 for the diamond, and catches Lyman trying to swap it out for a piece of cut glass. Oldest swindle in the book. Lindstrom walks out of the bar with the real diamond. As Lindstrom walks down the street and turns into an alleyway, he's being followed by Lyman. When Lyman pulls a knife on him, Lindstrom identifies himself as a police officer and says, "This is an arrest." A furious fight ensues, and even though Lindstrom's not as limber as his younger assailant, he manages to get the cuffs on Lyman and make the arrest. The next day, Holbrook's got good news. Looks like nobody is getting retired from the force today. A retake of the physical and Lindstrom's performance in arresting Lyman means Lindstrom gets to keep his badge. The end.
Well, Earl, I'm so blue.
Are you on fire?
I could have sung that so much better than trying to do a Patsy Cline impersonation.
But, you know, it could be worse. I could be a man who lies, whose name is Lyman.
Ugh.
Gene, dude, you are on a roll with the character names. This is the best one since Jim Highland.
Well, you know what I think about when I hear the name Lyman is in Garfield, the comic strip, in its original context, John had a roommate named Lyman, and that's what I think about.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I'd forgotten all about that.
Yeah. So
until you mentioned it, because, you know, I have adjusted to the new normal.
Yes, the new normal. But we've not quite sent that in a box to Abu Dhabi yet, have we?
Not at all.
No.
There are numerous places in this episode where I am pretty sure I was not supposed to break out laughing, and yet I did.
Tell us more.
Okay, Lindstrom, in this opening teaser, is glancing at his smoldering cigarette 1 second before announcing that he's failed his physical, and I'm sitting here trying not to yell at the screen. Otto, buddy, think there might be a connection there? Because these are the smokingest cops I have ever seen on television.
Well,
I would hate to be in that room.
Yeah. I mean, talk about a cloud. I mean, it's not a blue cloud, but it's I don't know, you want to call it a cancer cloud? Because that's what we got in there.
They talk about the one guy as being in his 30s, and it's like, no, he looks like 44 if he's a day. Yeah, seriously. And it's something I noticed later in the episode. My blood pressure is high. Takes a shot of whiskey, smokes a cigarette, has a pint of beer in front of him. I was like, I have no idea why. It must be because I was tired when I went in to do my exam. Has nothing to do with, drinking on the job and smoking how many packs a day. Yeah, completely unrelated. That has to be a coincidence, a total coincidence.
Legit.
By the way, in the interest of full disclosure, I should point out that our video that we have of this episode, and this is one of these things that I tracked down in the nooks and crannies of the internet, finding someone who had these episodes of the detectives. The video of this episode is completely missing like 90% of the opening teaser. And so the scene with the mother and daughter that I was talking about, that is from the script. However, I noticed when we got to the end credits, only the mother is credited. There is not a mention of the daughter. She is not credited. And so I don't know if that scene made it from the script to the screen in the form that it is written here. So I'm glad we had the script, but there may be some discrepancies there if a video of the full episode ever actually turns up. Now, going back to Lindstrom's high blood pressure, I'm pretty sure I was not supposed to be laughing at this, but I did. Russo and Conway making so helpful suggestions. Is there some new medicine you could take to bring that down? Would a couple of weeks of vacation bring your blood pressure down? It's like, it's this temporary, transitory thing, like a cold, and it'll go away.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting side note, because we do also have the script for this. Gene's script, as originally written, says low blood pressure.
Well,
but when they filmed it, it's high blood pressure.
Well, considering, again, the amount of alcohol and smoking happening on here, aside from being, in a high-stress job like a police detective, I can imagine high blood pressure makes more sense.
One of these things is not like the other. Yeah, another
Indeed.
Reason, another tell that we're dealing with a high blood pressure situation. I am really glad that we had the script for this episode. Because everyone is saying everything so fast, I can't understand a word they're saying half the time.
I know. This is one of those times where, unfortunately, some of the auto-generated captions were not available for this episode. So I definitely had to rewind a few times. Like, what did he say?
Yeah, especially Lindstrom. He is talking a mile a minute. But especially in Act 1, everyone he's in a scene with, whether it's Willie the informant or whether it's Mays, the guy that he beats up, or the guy whose door he kicks down. These people are all talking really fast. It just reminds me of the old radio joke, if this had been an actual emergency, I would have been talking a lot faster.
Yep.
So again, comparing the script to the episode, the beginning of Act 2, there is a scene there that is a lot longer, and it did not get filmed. Because Lindstrom has to talk the bartender into telling him where Willie is. Rather than what we got in the show, which is, Lindstrom walks into the bar and Willie's just sitting there like Cliff Clavin. Minus the Postal Service.
Right.
So obviously, this was changed before shooting, probably for time. Although, they probably could have squeezed a lot more of these scenes into Act 2 if everyone kept talking so fast.
Right.
And, again, going back to our rampant alcohol consumption in this episode, which is in no way related to Otto Lindstrom's high blood pressure. Okay, that daytime confab with Willie at the bar, with Willie and the bartender, really, because the bartender's got to be in on, that last bit of business. I'm going to say that was happening at lunchtime or maybe slightly before. We then fade to later at the same bar. Same bartender is still on duty. That guy is working some hours.
I'd say he's working a double that day.
Either somebody called in or perhaps he called and told somebody to take the evening off because something was going down and he thought he should be the one to be there.
Yeah, that would make sense. Although somebody not showing up for their afternoon or evening shift, that also makes sense, at least in the experience of most folks I know that have worked in the restaurant business. If you work morning shift, you are often going to be asked to stay late to cover because somebody didn't show up. old guy gets forced into retirement. That's not something we've ever heard before. Or doesn't want to retire because I've almost caught this bad guy, or doesn't want to change jobs because I've got this list of bad guys I've got to check. Gestures wildly and Die Hard. This seems to be a pretty common thing.
Lindstrom is a regular on the show.
Sure.
And so thankfully we know that he is not going to be that one guy who has been in every cop show. I'm only 4 days away from retiring. Here's a picture of the old lady.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a picture of my fishing hole where I'm going to spend all my time. That guy is dying by the end of that episode.
Yeah.
We know that's not going to happen here, so at least that's one trope that we can safely push off the board.
Yeah.
Actually, it's only half an hour of very fast-talking police action. I'm sure we both have some thoughts on this. I have... Actually, before we get to the thoughts, and maybe this should have been part of the observation, there was a piece of terminology in here that I had to go look up because I was unfamiliar with it or couldn't really place it in context. The Bunko Squad.
So that's interesting because I missed that entirely. I play Bunko.
Okay, well, I was about to say you were part of the problem, but you're not really.
I play a game called Bunko. There's
Right, it's a dice game.
Yeah, it's a dice game. It's a silly dice game. A friend of mine started up a Bunko group, and part of it was because she's a mom and has difficulty finding time to socialize with people other than her husband and children. It was a way to get to hang out with other ladies and play a game that does not require brain power. We all bring assorted snacks for sharing, and we eat food and play Bunko for a couple hours, and it's fun, and it's a nice way to get to know other people, because the Bunko game, the way we play, makes you move around to different tables, so you get to talk to different people. So it's almost like speed dating, because we do there's maybe when we play, there might be 10 to 15 of us, so we split into multiple tables, and you can have a max of 4 people at a table.
It is related to that game, but really more related to the form that the game took when it was first introduced in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, in roughly the same post-Civil War time period of Boots and Saddles or Have Gun Will Travel is when it came to the U.S. But at that time, it was considered a con game.
Fascinating.
And
I didn't know this.
People would lose money, and, there would be organized places, kind of like speakeasies or whatever, except for Bunko. And so that's how you got the Bunko Squad. Today, that would be the fraud division, looking for people being swindled out of their money. And more specifically, they are looking for the people who are swindling others out of their money.
That's nuts.
So that is the origin of the Bunko Squad. The funny thing is, when I went looking for it, all I found was, oh yes, there's a movie called Bunko Squad.
I just Googled that, and I'm like, what is this?
Yeah, and I'm like, well, great. That still does not tell me what the Bunko Squad is. So I had to keep digging, and against my will, learned the entire history of the game of Bunko. But that's the fun of doing this podcast.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we get to go off on some nice little rabbit trails every now and again. I enjoy that. The Bunko Squad. That's hysterical. I'm going to pass that movie along to my Bunko group, because apparently
you should call yourselves the Bunko Squad.
Well, it's funny. Our group text is called Bunko Baddies. This is right up there. And it is funny, at least here in the South, Bunko is a game played by older women, like women of retirement age.
That did come up in my research, that's really the target demographic now.
That's hysterical. Yeah.
Occasionally people still bet money on it.
We just use it as a way to socialize.
Yeah. It's not as organized as it was when apparently it was so widespread that you had to have a Bunko Squad. Ironically, the Bunko Squad being such an outdated idea, I think this is why Lindstrom is the oldest guy on the show.
Mm.
Because out of the detectives, all these other guys have, slicked back jet black hair. And Otto is obviously older than all of them. And there's even that speech that Holbrook gives him is like, you know who taught me to, be a straight arrow police officer? It's a guy named Otto Lindstrom.
Mm.
But there's another part of that speech that I kind of want to home in on here. And that is this line that Holbrook, barks into Lindstrom's face. Intelligent, experienced, professional police work. Okay. That was the line. That sounds like a really good idea.
Yeah.
And you would think a former LA policeman seems like the perfect person to build a script around that idea, especially since one of Gene's earliest pieces of published writing is an essay called Achieving Professionalism, published on May 1st, 1953, in the Journal of Criminal Law, Criminology, and Police Science, nearly a full year before he ever handed in a single TV script for anything. And interestingly, Gene's article still gets cited in other papers to this day. One of the points in his article from 1953 says that a professional has, and I quote, a duty to employ full skill at all times, regardless of considerations of personal gain, comfort, or safety, and to at all times assist fellow professionals upon demand. And this kind of goes back to what Holbrook says to Lindstrom about, you are a detective lieutenant working for a detective lieutenant's pay. I want to see the effort that goes along with that. And that kind of goes straight back to this 1953 article that Gene wrote, actually intending for other professional police officers to read it. So Gene's description from that paper, okay, on the one hand, I don't see a lot of work-life balance in that sentence, but it really closely mirrors that line in this show. The problem with this episode, my big problem with accepting this episode as, an exciting piece of primetime television, is Lindstrom goes rogue. He roughs up a new informant, and he may or may not be responsible for that guy getting killed. Because somebody let loose that this fellow was going to meet someone from outside the organization. Someone narked. Someone new. Lindstrom kicks down the door of someone completely unconnected to his case. So in other words, he's showing all the signs of being emotionally compromised by this case.
Yeah.
And Holbrook lets him stay on the case because, hey, we've all worked together a long time. Get out there one last time and win one for the team. I guess I just expected something a bit different from the author of Achieving Professionalism.
Yeah, I wasn't wild about how he handled this and and emotionally compromised. That's a great way to phrase that, because he's not dealing well with this situation. He is, acting out. He's trying to jump around and avoid getting, facing the retirement board, because the other detective calls in a favor, and he's like, "Are you doing me a favor? She's not that bad." Like, ooh.
Oh, that line.
That was not a good look, Gene. Sorry, bud.
Wow.
Jeez.
Okay.
I'll take you to dinner if you drop this in the wrong basket, please and thank you. Didn't care for that one, but this is the second Gene episode where we see these guys just kicking down somebody's door because they're suspicious. They don't have a warrant. They don't have probable cause. It's just, hey, let's just go kick down this guy's door because someone who might be doing something wrong might be in here.
Yeah, no warrant required. They're the detectives.
The detectives.
On the trail of the broker.
Yeah, or maybe other detectives can't do this, but Robert Taylor's the detectives can do this.
Yeah, it's like they forgot to stop and ask for a piece of paper from the judge.
The judge.
I guess what I'm looking for here is some consequences beyond a throwaway mention that Lindstrom is out a third of a month's pay. Okay, that's a big deal. If I was out a third of a month's pay, I'd be hurting.
Yeah, that's not insubstantial.
Yeah. And, let me also be clear about this. The Detectives is far from the only police or crime drama, 1960s or 20 now, to utilize this trope of one of our guys stepped across the line, and for that he will receive a stern, and I do mean stern, talking to, and maybe one whole slap on the wrist. The fact that this is such a trope is where my disappointment lies with this episode. You didn't need a writer as skilled as Gene to write this script. Anyone could have written this. But, I do get it that even Gene had to pay the mortgage, and so here we are.
I also find it frustrating, again, and help me out here, because I haven't read the article that you and Norm have referenced about the masculinity script, but there seems to be this running theme of men can't retire because they have no identity outside of work. So here we've got an old guy, and by the way, I did the math. The gentleman that played Lindstrom would have been approximately 53 or 54 when this episode was filmed. So definitely,
he looks older.
Definitely up there for a police detective. I would have been surprised if he were older, or wouldn't have been surprised if he were older. But this is a pet peeve of mine, because here in the United States, and I think this is a symptom of Western culture as well, we're at a party. We're in a social situation. You meet someone. The first question is, what do you do? And I hate that question.
Yeah, me too.
And it's not because I'm not proud of the work I do, because I am proud of the work I do. But I don't want that to be my identity. I want my identity to be Ashley is kind. Ashley is a good friend. Ashley works hard to love people well. That is what I want to be identified by. Not Ashley's a writer and a podcaster and, a DJ,
Yeah.
And so I make a point when I'm at a party and let's say I have a friend with me, like, for example, these are my friends, Michael and Haley. Michael and Haley were the first real friends that Ryan and I made when we moved to Charlotte. And I identify them in a way that is not the jobs they do.
Right.
So.
And I think maybe you're kind of starting to recover from that now.
A little,
but not enough, because, yeah, as you pointed out, and I also hate this question. What do you do? Well, I stand here and dread having to answer weirdly career-focused questions when I'm not at work.
Right.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't tell people what I do because you wouldn't believe me.
People are like, what? Really? That's a job? It's like, yes, it is.
There is a line specifically when Holbrook is having that really testy phone conversation with his boss, the police commissioner. Yeah, that was a really angry phone call to have with his boss.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to say, and then hung up on him mid-conversation. But he said something like, he wouldn't last a month in retirement.
Yeah.
So what, he's just supposed to work till he drops? Really?
I mean, if people want to continue to working until their job, I suppose that's their prerogative. But in a job like this, that's a health hazard. Like, at least your employer cares enough about you to Like, hey, your blood pressure's too high. This job might kill you. We would rather not have that on our hands. There's that. But also, like, I don't understand having this be your whole identity.
Yeah.
Like, did you not have an identity prior to working this job?
Well, the problem is the Detectives is really cut from very much the same cloth as Dragnet, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I seem to remember reading that the original formulation of Dragnet was that we were going to avoid talking about what happens off duty. And so you can't even blame this entirely on the Detectives. It is inheriting this, again, this very tropish part of the format from previous successful police shows. It worked for them. We should do things the same way. So these guys apparently have no life outside of getting together and playing poker after hours.
Right.
Which, if you remember from the end of Karate, that's what they're talking about at the end of that show, too.
I'd say cold cuts and drinks in Holbrook's garage.
Good times, guys. Good times. After you're done working all this stressful police stuff together, yeah, all hang out together.
Mm-hmm.
That's excellent work-life balance there.
I mean, obviously, I have coworkers I enjoy hanging out with. Gestures wildly at Earl Green. And at my other work too, I have coworkers that are my friends outside of work.
Yeah, right. And I think we all do.
Yeah, pretty much. But do you do other things like other days of the week besides work and work related activities and people that you work with? Do you have community elsewhere? Do you have family?
Yeah, like the one guy, does he only go out on a date if he needs somebody's medical papers delayed by 48 hours?
Well, and even Lindstrom mentions that he has kids, but apparently he's married to the job, so...
Poor kids.
I don't know.
Although, they probably couldn't understand him telling them to get up and get ready for school in the morning because he says it really, really fast.
So to go, to get ready to school. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I can't leave that alone. Something about the pacing of this episode felt way off.
Well, and I feel it's slightly ironic for us to be talking about how fast the dialogue is when I've got a Lower Decks background going on, but even so, like...
The thought did occur. It, kind of felt like season 1 Lower Decks, only not funny.
Right.
I don't know if the pacing was a directorial decision or if it was the actors kind of self-directing. It felt like we were really trying to make sure we emphasized that Lindstrom feels like he's on borrowed time, so everything's got to be fast. It's exhausting to watch. And in a few cases, again, it made me laugh out loud in a place where I wasn't supposed to laugh out loud. Look, there's a scene after Lindstrom beats up Maze. And he checks his pulse, but only for like a split second.
Yeah.
You can't get a read on your pulse in that time.
He was making sure he had one.
Okay, good. Still alive. Better get going.
Blood pressure? We'll see. We'll check it later when I've calmed down with my cigarette and a shot and a beer.
Yeah, never mind making the arrest within 48 hours. Lindstrom wants to make the arrest by the end of Act 1.
Yeah.
Again, it's not supposed to be funny, but it kind of is because we did watch Karate before this one. It was not paced like this episode.
Not at all.
So
wildly different.
Yeah, this was definitely an outlier. So I don't know if this was on Don Medford or if this was the gentleman playing Lindstrom just telling everyone, okay, I'm going to stuff 10 pounds of dialogue into a 5-pound bag. Match my energy.
All valid.
Okay, Ashley, I think we have burned up the entire blue fire on our discussion for this episode. Did you happen to spot a message anywhere in here?
I think the message is shirk the rules, call in a favor, put off retirement because you don't have an identity outside of work. That is the moral meaning message that I took from this.
Oh.
And if that is the moral meaning message I'm supposed to take from this, I'm going to quote the great philosopher Elrond and say, cast it into the fire!
I should have asked if there was a good message.
It's like, sorry for everybody's Foley that I just destroyed. My bad.
Yeah, I didn't come up with anything much better. Cops can have a little extrajudicial violence as a treat. Best I could do.
Right.
Along with a little salami, which will absolutely not drive up your blood pressure if you eat it in excessive amounts. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm still stuck on that.
Warrants are optional?
Okay, still no good messages.
No. No.
Okay, maybe if you reach in, and for visual reference for everyone to have in mind, this is like Flash Gordon reaching into the tree stump with the critter that could sting him and leave him paralyzed and begging for death. You could reach in and maybe pull out a message about ageism.
Maybe.
But that's quite a reach, and it's quite a pull, and here's the part that really pains me to say it. The Gatling gun and the Prussian farmer both did that message way better. And those weren't even terribly good scripts themselves. One of the side effects of doing this podcast the way we do it is that it creates the illusion that Gene's hitting that theme a whole bunch of times in rapid succession. But the detective scripts were written 2 years after the Boots and Saddles scripts. So it's not just Gene frantically hammering that message on every show that he writes for. There is some distance in between. And, some writers have pet issues that they are going to work into everything that they can. That's okay. But this episode, there's nothing here that really feels anything like Gene Roddenberry's best work. It feels like one of those scripts where you take the temperature of the room from what the producers are asking for, and you deliver exactly that. Something that they can shoot. Mostly because we noted several times there was stuff in the script that did not make it into the show. And something that's doable within the budget, and that's really the biggie. And then you get paid for that script, and you pay the bills. Probably not great job satisfaction. And also maybe not great viewing. But that's the television writer's life. It's just that this is not exemplary of what we associate a Gene Roddenberry script with being, in my opinion.
I guess I maybe because I like detective stories more than I like Western stories. The detectives were like 50-50 for me on the 2 episodes that we've covered here. This is not the work that we come to expect from Gene. I feel like this is more of a, hey, we need this kind of story, and you have bills to pay.
Yeah. Ironically, I do like the scenes where they're all kind of circling the wagons. They're forcing you into retirement. Oh, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. I liked that better than the scenes of the actual police work.
Yeah.
Because I felt like the scenes of the police work, especially Lindstrom, he's through the guardrail and into the ravine, and you need to call a hazmat team stat.
Well, and talk about high blood pressure. As fast as he was talking and roughing guys up, yeah, that man's got high blood pressure. He's calmed down.
Yeah, exactly. All the scenes of, hey, Matt, are you okay? Hey, Otto, are you okay? I actually kind of like that because you start to get the vague outlines of, these guys are kind of a family, maybe with terrible work-life balance, but kind of a family. Band of brothers, whatever you want to call it. But then the story focuses on one of them, and you're no longer getting that. I want a whole episode where they're all off duty.
Well, I feel like that would just be a poker game with cold cuts and drinks.
Yeah, everyone eats so many cold cuts, they all walk away with high blood pressure.
I love me a good charcuterie board, but I should not be having one every single day because I will turn into a salami.
Mission Log Gene-ology is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Special thanks to the Roddenberry Repertory Players. Our cast this week featured Mike Richards as Matt Holbrook and Shawn Harklerode as Otto Lindstrom. If you would like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. If you have any material that might be of interest to us that isn't already in the Roddenberry archive, drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com.
On the next Gene-ology, Sundance and the Black Widow. Special thanks to consulting producers Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Schabel, Paul Shadwell, and David Takechi.
We'll be back next week with more of your favorite programs. This concludes our broadcast day.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.